Hello everybody, welcome to the Basics EC2 guide we're going to have today. And we're pretty much just going to walk through everything you need to know to get started with EC2. We're going to cover launching your very first instance, connecting to it, managing it, and cleaning up everything once you're done. First of all, we're going to start off with a bit of theory, right? Just to understand it a little better. So EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. And pretty much in simple terms, it lets you rent virtual servers within the cloud as opposed to buying physical hardware. And you can spin your server up for a couple minutes or for as long as you need to, and you only pay for what you use. And throughout this tutorial in the series, you're going to hear me call these virtual server instances. And an instance is just a virtual machine running in AWS. EC2 is pretty much one of the most foundational services in AWS, and every other service, almost every other service, connects back to it in some form or way. So understanding EC2 is really understanding the core of AWS. So let's jump into the console and we'll start by having a look around. First of all, we're going to see a search box up here, and we're just going to type in EC2. Okay, so we're in here, and once we're here, before we do anything, I want to point something out that's very, very important. So at the top right corner, we're going to see the region selector, and everything in EC2 is regional. So that means if I launch an instance in US East, North Virginia, I would not see that instance if I switch to Europe, Ireland. So make sure you're always in the right region. And for this demo, I'm going to be using the US East one, North Virginia region. Okay. And this is the most commonly used region throughout AWS. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the dashboard. Okay, this gives us a quick overview of everything going on in the region. In the center, we can see a summary of all our resources, and it shows us how many instances are running, how many volumes you have, security groups, key pairs, and more. So this is a fresh account, so most of these will be pretty much zero, except security groups, because every VPC comes with a default security group. Okay. So on the left hand side we have our navigation menu, and this is how you get to everything in EC2. So let me walk you through the key sections. First we have our instances. This is where you'll spend most of your time. You can see your running instances, launch new ones, and manage your already existing ones. Images, this is where you find your AMIs, and AMIs are pretty much just templates that are used to launch instances. Think of an AMI as a snapshot of a server that includes the operating system and any pre-installed software you have. We also have our Elastic Block Store. This is our storage. EBS volumes are like virtual hard drives that we can attach to our instances. Network and security. This is where we manage security groups, key pairs, and elastic IPs. We also have load balancing and auto scaling. These are more advanced features that we'll probably touch on at the end of this video or probably in our next video. Okay, so now let's take our hands over to launching our first instance. Alright, so let's launch our first EC2 instance. From the EC2 dashboard, I'm going to click this big orange launch instance button right here in the middle. And this will open us up to our launch wizard, right? And we're just going to walk through everything we need to configure section by section, okay? So, at the top we have our names and tags, and pretty much it's what we name our instance to make it easy to identify within the console. So I'm just going to call this one my first instance. All right. We also have tags as well. Tags are pretty useful for cost optimization. What we're going to look through next is choosing an AMI, right? So next, an AMI is a Amazon machine image, and this is the template for our instance. It defines the operating system and any pre-installed software. So the quick start tab shows the most popular options, right? As we can see, Amazon Linux, Ubuntu, Windows, amongst others. And throughout my role, I usually use the Amazon Linux. So we're gonna go with that option, and it's pretty much AWS's own Linux distribution, and it's optimized for using AWS services within the cloud. and most importantly, it's free tier eligible, right? And which is pretty. We also have the AWS Marketplace AMI as well, and pretty much in here, this is where some third-party software pre-installed, like WordPress or maybe some other security appliances. We can use some of these there. Most of them have additional costs, right? But for now, we're just going to work with our Amazon Linux distro. And we're going to head back to our quick start. What we're going to do next is we are going to choose our instance type, right? And this determines how much CPU, memory, and network performance our instance gets, right? So think about it like choosing the size of your server. So for now, we're going to set it to be T2 micro, right? As you can see, it's generally going to be the first one that comes up, right? And that's usually because it is free tier eligible, right? So this gives you one virtual CPU and 1 GB of memory, and that's plenty for learning and for testing, right? I'm going to explain what most of these naming conventions means, right? So generally speaking, right, T2 micro, for example, the T is the family, right? So T is for burstable general purpose stuff, right? And the 2 is the generation. So the higher the number, the newer it is, right? And then the micro would stand for the size, and sizes range from nano all the way up to metal, right? So which gives you the entire physical server. So I'm going to attach in the comment section below a pretty good cheat sheet for instance families that I had to learn from my role, right? But it's still pretty good. So for this demo, we're just going to stick to T2 micro, okay? All right. So now we need a key pair. And a key pair is how we securely log into our instance via SSH. AWS creates a pair of keys, a public key that goes on the instance and a private key that we download and we keep safe. So let's make our key pair, okay? All right, so over here, we're going to create a new key pair, right? And we're just going to keep it with RSA, which is the standard. And for the file format, we're going to choose .pem. So now we're just going to click over here and create our key pair. Oh, we also need to give it a name as well, right? So we're just going to call it toot key pair. Okay. And we're going to click create key pair right here. And we're going to see we have a file that's just being downloaded over here. Okay. So this is our private key, right? And this is extremely important because you can only download this file once, right? And if you lose it, you cannot download it again. So I'd probably recommend you keep it somewhere safe. And yeah. Okay. So next we're going to look at our network settings, right? Networking is very important with me, so I'll be able to explain this section pretty well. So we're going to start by configuring some of these settings here. So we're just going to click the edit button to see all of our possible options we have. So for VPC, we'll use the default VPC, right? Every AWS account comes with a default VPC in each region, which is perfect for just getting started, okay? For a subnet, we're going to leave it with no preference as AWS will pick a subnet in any availability zone for us, okay? So we're just going to keep it with no preference. Same here as well, okay? And for auto assign public IP, we're going to make sure this is set to enable. So this will give our instance a public IP address so that we can connect to it over the internet. Without this, we would not be able to SSH into it from our local machine. So that's very important. So next, for our firewall settings, this is where we configure our security groups, right? A security group acts as a virtual firewall that controls what traffic can actually reach our instance, right? So we're just going to click over here and create our own security group, and we're just going to call it special, right? We call it special SG, okay? And we'll just put a description as toot SG. So it's generally good practice to give it a name and give a description as well, so that when you look back at it, you can remember what you're using it for. And okay, so by default, usually creates a rule to allow SSH on ports 22. But one thing that we've got to notice is, right, is our source type says anywhere, which means 0.0.0.0.0/0. And that's pretty much the entire internet, right? That's not pretty secure. So what we're going to do is we're going to change our source to our own IP address, right? And this automatically fills in my current IP address so that only I can SSH into this instance. And this is best practice, right? So it always restricts SSH access to unknown IP. So we're just gonna do my IP. Perfect. Just like that, we can see the difference there. Okay. And we're going to add this rule, just like that. Okay. So next we're going to add a HTTP rule as well. Okay. So we're just gonna go in here and we're going to choose HTTP. Okay. So the reason we're adding in an HTTP rule is so we can test our web server later, right? So yeah, so what this does, it sets port 80 for the source, and we'll leave it with anywhere because we want anyone to be able to view our web page. Okay, so this is our hard drive for our instance, and by default we have a 8 gigabytes GP3 root volume, and GP3 is our general purpose SSD volume type, and it's the recommended default, and it gives us pretty good performance at a pretty reasonable price as well. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to change this to 15 gigabytes, which is still well within the free tier limit of 30 gigabytes. Don't forget. And if I click advanced over here, perfect. Hold on. Yeah, if I click advanced over here, we'll be able to see a couple of new settings, right? So we can see that it says, hold on. Okay, so once we bumped up our size to 15 gigabytes, what we're going to do next is we're going to expand to have a look at some of the more advanced settings, right? So generally speaking, we see delete on termination, right? And that is the usual default setting. And that pretty much just means once we terminate or permanently delete the instance, and also the storage volume will be deleted as well. And if you want your data to survive after the instance is gone, we will need to change this to no. There's also an encryption option as well for production workloads, and we should generally always encrypt our volumes. For this demo, we'll leave it as it is. Okay, so next, for our advanced details section, if you scroll over to the bottom over here, we can see that it has a couple more options as well, but I'm just going to highlight the important ones. We won't make any changes to any of these right now, but we should know that they exist, okay? So, first of all, we're going to take a look at the IAM instance profile, okay? Right? So, cool. This is where we attach an IAM role to our instance. If our instance needs to talk to another AWS service, something like S3 or DynamoDB, we generally use an IAM role here instead of putting access keys on the instance. But we're going to cover this later in another video. Next, we're going to look over to the termination protection, right? And if we enable this, it also stops the instance from being able to be accidentally terminated, which is very important for production servers, right? Next, if we scroll down as well, we should also see we have some more protection, right? And this controls what happens if we shut down from inside the instance, right? So it's usually set to stop by default, but if we want, and if we were to terminate the instance, shutting down the OS would permanently delete your instance, right? Okay, so we also have metadata version, right? And this is for security. AWS, generally speaking, it's very good to use v2 only, right? And for new instances, we should be using this because it protects us from certain types of attacks, okay? So Now we're going to scroll all the way down to user data, right? And this is actually where it gets pretty interesting. So the user data lets us run a script automatically once the instance first launches. So it kind of gives the instance a to-do list for when it boots up. So I'm going to paste a simple bash script that does a couple of things. So first, it updates the system packages. Next, it installs Apache to be our web server. And third, it starts the web server and it enables it to start once the boot process has begun. And fourth, to create a simple HTML page that says hello from my first EC2 instance. This way, once our EC2 instance is ready, we will have a working web server that we can visit within our browser. So once we have our script in here, I'm also going to attach this script into the comment section for anyone who wants to try it out. Next, we're going to launch our instance. What we'll do is we're just going to give it about 30 seconds to boot up and to be ready, and then we continue back from here. So once we have our instance running and we've given it about 30 seconds to about a minute or two, we're going to take our public IPv4 address, right? And we're going to copy it right here into our URL. And we're just going to press enter. And we can see we have hello from EC2. This web page was created automatically by a user data script launch and has a bunch of other information over here. And we can see that our user data script worked. It installed Apache, created a web page, all automatically at launch. And we launched a web server within the cloud in about 2 minutes. And this kind of shows the scale and the power of EC2. So yeah, pretty much. So what we're going to do next is we're going to learn how to actually connect to the instance and start running a few Linux commands inside of it. I hope you enjoyed this section.